collaboration. Julia is the director of the Kunsthalle Osnabrück, and she has many other activities, and she's president of the IKT, the International, how's it exactly?
The International Association of Curators of Contemporary Art, and my hobbies are.
Thank you very much. Yeah. And next to Julia is Catharina Szonn and sorry. Catharina Szonn, Bachlechner, and Ginta Tinte Vasermane. So, yeah.
So, hello everybody. Thanks Alfred Rothers for introducing us. This is the first artist talk today, and I'm very happy to sit here with Catharina, Anna and Ginta, which I have known only very briefly. I hope that everybody is aware of the works that are presented here from the three artists present in the show. The title of the whole EMAF program is Wild Wild Grammar, and I would like to take it from there and ask the artists to introduce their work by telling us a little bit, what does language have to do with their work? I see Ginta. Ginta looks at us, and if you know what Ginta is presenting here, it's a 3-channel presentation with no words, no spoken word, no written word. But nevertheless, I think in Wild Wild Grammar, language is to be understood as something that goes far beyond the written or spoken word. But nevertheless, you can dwell on that as well in your short presentation of your work. But of course, it also is centered on codes, on symbols, on grammar as a structure. Language is what makes it flexible. Those structures and flexibilities that are fixed after a short while are part of our language as well. So, well, let's start with somebody who actually works with language. Bachlechner, I would like you to introduce us to Studio Hallo.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for coming. So, Studio Hallo is actually a TV series. So it has 4 parts. It has never been broadcasted on television because we don't live in a perfect world. But we broadcasted it online on our own channel, so to say. And Studio Hallo is it's a TV format, and it draws from the language of television. So it uses a lot of imagery that you might be familiar with from television, from talk shows to moderations to street interviews, or an expert explaining something to you, or also documentary film material, so a little bit news style as well. And yes, I mean that is the main focus of the piece, that it uses these sort of visual and also spoken languages that is like media language, I would say. And yeah, it draws its maybe contradictions from that. So somebody also told me watching it that they liked that they are somehow misled often, that your expectations aren't fulfilled, that a scene promises something, or a character then kind of turns on you, or the expert isn't trustworthy, or the person on the street in the interview says something that you really wouldn't expect from them. Something like that. Yeah, I think for an introduction that's enough.
I would like to continue with another question, because obviously your work is very much language based. It's a television it's a fake TV show in a way. And would you shortly ask us how much of that of the spoken word that we hear is scripted? It has the big advantage for everybody who is here in the audience and doesn't speak German, that this is bilingual. And you wonder how much is really planned for and how much is very spontaneous.
It's heavily scripted. There is not really any improvisation in the piece. It's a lot of sometimes things are reenacted. So sometimes we would draw our texts from things that we overheard on public transport. Sometimes texts come from more theoretical sources, like Mark Fisher was a big influence. Capitalist realism is a text that we incorporated a lot. And then, but also like more texts from, for example, training call center workers. So what is their tutorials on how to deal with complaints or requests in the call center. So those are sources that I write a lot of the scripts. And then so it's heavily scripted. It's not really improvised. Yeah, I mostly do the writing. Yes.
Talking about languages, Catharina Szonn, is really a challenge. It's a challenge for me because I had to look up how to translate the complex title of a work, flexible Erwartungsauffälligkeit. This is almost incomprehensible for a German speaker because it's a combination of words that it's unusual. I don't want to say it doesn't make sense, but it's, well, you have really to get your head around it, and it probably doesn't make sense. And in its senselessness, it triggers a lot of thoughts. I looked it up and I would translate it as flexible expectation conspicuousness. Would you tell us a little bit about your work?
First of all, hello. That's right. I'm the most how I use language. I use it first of a poetic way. I think the whole art piece is working on a poetic way itself, and the text, what you can see on the LED panel or also on the paper, was destroyed by the shredder. They are self-written poems, and also the title is. I think in German it's really interesting that you can combine words together to get a new, perspective of the word itself, and you can make combinations with maybe different contents, what a word has or something like this. And for me, it's maybe language is not important to understand. I think it's also interesting that you are maybe frustrated of an ununderstanding situation or something like this. And it's not important to understand everything and to understand language on the way you have to understand the language or something like this, or if you learn to understand the language. And I always in my practice, or maybe if I have an idea of an art piece or something like this, I write a lot of stuff about the idea or something like this, and it's often made from images I saw. Maybe I notice the text by an image, and that means that for me text is also an image. It's not really, it's maybe coded, of course, by myself or something like this. You cannot really decode it, and then I just put it together like a fragment and maybe it's also a way of collage text together, and then you get maybe another image from maybe text images, and then you become in a situation of not really understandable pieces. The texts also make a reference of the situation from the machine, that you have the loop system and maybe there's no situation of escape or something like this. It's more, maybe a situation of decomposition or something like this. And the texts are, maybe you can catch one fragment, but maybe then you have another text file, and then it's you cannot really understand all, or maybe it's not. Yeah, it's not my intent to make it understandable. Yeah. I think we had a talk why it's not in English or something like this. I think in German it's also abstract. You cannot really understand it, and maybe it's like the same if people would read it. It's not able to understand German. It's the same situation that it's abstract.
Actually, your title reminds me a little bit of Yves Netzhammer's work. Are you familiar with the Swiss artist? His titles are almost like yours, incomprehensible. So this is like a solace for you, Ginta, that you don't understand the text pieces of Catharina Szonn. We don't understand it either. Okay, that's another challenge, asking you about language, as you have that speechless, silent, 3-channel piece in the show. But nevertheless, when we yesterday talked about it, you have a sort of coding in the work by using figures that do open up a horizon of meanings, like all the people in the piece are men in suits. Would you like to explain a little bit of where that comes from?
Yeah, okay. So my inspiration was, I will shortly describe my inspiration, was like fights in parliament, like in different countries. I was looking in YouTube videos, and I was looking at it, like there was fights in different countries, like Ukraine, Turkey, Korea, all over, and it's really like fist fighting and bloody faces and throwing eggs to each other. And I was looking at it and I was thinking, wow, this is kind of funny, but it's totally not funny. And so I was observing the behavior like more sculpturally as well, and I was recreating it with those behaviors with choreographers and actors in my own way. So I was creating, staging a new existence with slight of irony and poetics. And yeah, about language, how it relates, I would say that artists propose possible different perspective of things, and that's for language. And proposing unknown is creating new language. So, something like that in short.
We had a short discussion yesterday about the fact that all your characters in the performance are male, and you told me that you try to draw a picture about human behavior and of certain human behavior which is extraordinary, and you just said it's sort of challenging. No, it's sort of in between being funny and being really serious. I was of the opinion that this is not a metaphor for human behavior, but male behavior. Do you agree with that?
Well, of course, in like when we look at like places like parliaments and business places, there is mostly male, no? So, but say that maybe in some other places there will be also females fighting. because the new work I'm planning to do is like, I'm looking again a lot of videos online about Black Friday sales, and it's like extreme fights in shopping malls. Like it's amazing choreography as well. Like, and there's females as well. So let's see that what will happen. Maybe it will be more wild.
Well, that's good, but it will be a different context, a different coding of the fight, and I'm very interested about that. Talking about the language that you create, you just said that you are working with choreographers and dancers who are professional, and you always working basically with the same group of people. So in a way, this is a delegated performance. How much can you influence the images that we see on the screen? How does that work? How much is coded and how much is flexible and creative and spontaneously decided by the people that you're working with?
When I first time worked with choreographers, I could not even explain them. I was just showing them images, but they are very specific choreographers. They are coming from School of Dance in Amsterdam, which is choreography school where they are thinking more about choreography. They don't learn much technical skills, but they are thinking about movement, and it's more thoughtful choreography school, and that's why I chose to work with them. And now they already know what I want, so it's easier. But like in this work, I also put non-actors inside, like these two people at speech table. They was just first time acting at all, and so it creates not. I like that it's not too choreographed as well. Yeah, so. But it's not totally like how do you say, improvisation. It's very thoughtfully explained and showed by images what I would like to see, and somehow they just know me already, so we have a kind of understanding.
I actually like that part very much, where the two people who are obviously no dancers try to stand still and are really, really shocked about what is going on among them. That gives the whole thing a touch of realness, which I appreciate very much. I guess the work with performing is very different with you, alle Bachlechner, because everybody can see you. You are part of the performers. But how does that work with you? You said the text is scripted. How do you work with the human body in your TV sessions?
It varies a lot. It depends on the different scenes, and also because I collaborate with a lot of people. So there's the core team of 3 people that are Studio Hallo, which is Felix Zilles-Perels over there, and Jonathan, he's not here. And so we 3 are the core team, and we developed a lot of it. And so, for example, the opening choreography in the first episode that references movement fragments from TV. It's like it's some product introduction movements, and this actually is from Felix. He choreographed the first bit, and we did it together. Felix, can you wave? And we rehearsed together. So it starts from an idea, then we try out things, rehearse together, we videotape ourselves, and then draw from or write down things. Then we create a pool of material usually, and then afterwards we piece it together. And then we know, oh, we have this choreography, let's put it there, or we have this movement bit that let's repeat this in the end or something like that. So this is one aspect, and I would say like the movement quality is also inspired by a little bit by contemporary choreographers like Meg Stewart, for example, was important for us. Like, so if you know her, but we are all non-dancers, the core team, and then there's in the 4th episode I worked with 2 dancers. They are doing the choreography in the academy space that looks a little bit like a small parliament, which is very much. I mean, we discovered that is very much a location or a style of location that we are both very much into. Official places. Yeah, and they are dancers, and they added their own choreography to the piece. So yeah, it very much depends.
There is a whole set of body languages that you're actually using. Like somebody who watches your videos without listening to the sound can say, this comes from yoga, and this comes from the fitness, from a fitness studio, from a workout place. And these are the typical gestures of TV presenters and things like that. What kind of meanings do you open up with that?
Yeah, again, I think I'm very much interested in collaging contradictions and combinations, placing things next to each other that then might influence you. So for the studio, for example, we very much wanted to create something that isn't easily codified as one thing, but maybe reminds you, like the shiny surfaces. There's something of and the costumes, there's something of a fetish, there's something of maybe like a little bit futuristic, but there's also jogging hosen, like like trainers, and so this in between. And I think that's the same with the movement, that maybe it functions that one movement guides you, or the meaning that it opens up. So you're thinking about, there's one scene that's about care. So Olivia shows you how you would help a disabled person into the wheelchair, but the way she shows it has some references to earlier scenes that we saw that had a completely different meaning. So yeah, so this kind of interwoven producing of meaning, maybe, yeah. Sorry.
But nevertheless, in all the movements that I see, might be me, and it might be because I've seen your previous work, which for me was a little bit a training school of neoliberalism. I can't renounce on saying all the movements that you are quoting and repeating and performing have to do something with a very neoliberalist system, because there is nobody, like usual movements that don't have that kind of background, like simple walking or I don't know, is not represented. How come?
I have never thought about it. I think I'm very much fascinated by, or like drawn to show, to some sort of maybe not necessarily authentic or relaxed or just being. Maybe maybe I'm not very good at it, but I think I'm drawn to performance as a as something that's always a layer that's on top and that we put on in different social situations, and we cannot really be without it. So so playing with it, I think, is for me the thing to do. Yeah.
Catharina, talking about movement, your movement is highly choreographed. I mean, there are only a few movements possible, but nevertheless they open a whole lot of varieties.
Yeah, I think the choreographer is the machine itself, and maybe the objects, they are function like a prosthesis or something like this. They are maybe performing, but it's not really, you cannot really calculate how they perform, because they are struggling with the objects, they are on the ground or something like this, and it's just like turning on the left side and on the right side, and then it's it's like it's maybe a situation of happening, and it's not, it's they are maybe also not really independent, they are maybe connected with the machine and the mechanical movement, and that's also a situation that they are not really free, they are looking really funny, and they are just making their movements there, but they are really lost objects, I think, and and in the end maybe they are just struggling with the material that comes from the top, and then they are just ending in the ground and just become also a object what will struggle for the other objects, and maybe it's like a self-digesting system or something like this, that you are just related, the objects are, everything is related to everything, maybe it's something like this, but it's not really, you cannot really calculate, it's not a fixed point or something like this for the object, it's, you will see what will happen, and it's also what how much time the objects will have if they are end or something like this. It's more the situation of not the meaning of repetition, maybe in a way of experience, or maybe practice or something like this, that you get better or something like this. It's more the situation of repetition with decomposition or destroying or something like this. Maybe if you just look at maybe literature, text or poems or something like this, maybe Warten of Godot or something like this could be a reference of the system of the machine or something like this. That maybe it's more the idea of loop itself, and also it's a reference to the text, because you have the visibility of a loop by the machine, and maybe the text panels you have, that's maybe the situation of invisible looping or something like this, because the text is also looping, but it's not, maybe it's the situation of invisibility of digitalism or something like this, or maybe of loops by digital stuff, and the machine is maybe the analog part of loop and shows maybe one view for a loop or something like this, and I have now the situation that the analog stuff is maybe becomes more a desire for people, because you have all this not understandable situation of digitalism, and then you have something what you can feel more or see more, you can touch it or something like this, or you also have some remembrance or something like this of also industry or something like this. Yeah, that's maybe the part of this. It's like dealing with maybe also visibility and invisibility. Yeah, what you have maybe really it's really contemporary, I think, because we are now on the way to maybe we are so fast in technology, and then we produce so much more material. But I'm often wondering, because in the past there was also so much material, and now we are just producing maybe more one-way material. That's like that's produced to. Maybe it's more a situation of obsolescence and something like this, and it's also in contrast with the machine inspired in the 70s, and maybe it was the idea of inspired forever, or it will be never destroyed or something like this. And it's also interesting that the company not existed anymore. It was also, I think, it collapsed in the beginning of the 1990s. I researched the company, and I think it is also interesting if you see how economy is changing, and then you can see, okay, in the beginning of the 90s, it was the start of the neoliberal economy, and it's also interesting that I'm just looking for objects from the maybe social economy from the past, and the idea of maybe it was more idea of solidarity or something like this, and I'm often really wonder where I buy the objects by the people who sell it to me. It's crazy that they just bought such a huge object in that time. It's no one would do this now. If for maybe. Yeah, of course. But if you're not a really huge company or something like this, it makes absolutely no sense to buy such a huge machine. And I think it's really interesting how maybe the idea or the meaning or the economy was maybe 40 years ago, that it was okay, I can just buy such stuff. That's maybe interesting, because now you have the situation, or maybe also the machine, you have the also the material, what is produced to be waste, and
Yesterday I was very fascinated by your comment about the loop and the circular structure, which is something analog. I hadn't thought about that for the longest time, but it's you can see that in so many things, like my analog watch still has a circle, and it goes round, but the digital watches, they just go forward. That's the progress. It seems to be unlimited. So you have just talked about the desire for the analog, and maybe that's a desire to the social economy, as you called it, as well. But there's also the nostalgia of something that won't come back, because this kind of circular structure is consuming itself. And I like that sort of ambiguity or contradiction, which corresponds to the whole theme of the show, I guess. You have already touched upon the political meaning of your work. Would you like to go a little bit deeper into that? If you like, because it's not only political, I know.
yeah, of course, it's also readable political. I think it's an open art piece because it's a poetic art piece, I think, and the viewer, I think it's not, I think my opinion is not that you have to read it on that way. I think it's, I think I'm not so interested in to make objects close, or maybe it's just a hermetical system or something like this. But of course it's also readable in a political way, because I'm really interested in the okay, Andreas Reckwitz. He wrote about the society of the singularities, and he said that maybe now we are now in a situation that the individual is, the responsibility is maybe now transformed of the individual, and it's not, if something is going wrong, or maybe you are not really flexible or something like this, then it's you are fault, and not the system, or maybe a state or something like this is false. Maybe this is really interesting because you can also transport the situation from the objects in maybe a metaphor for being a subject or something like this in now in neoliberal capitalism or something like this. Because if something goes wrong, that you are wrong, and I think that's not true. Maybe it can be, of course, but not at all. And maybe this is what I'm wondering, that we are maybe now get better, higher and faster, and but also that makes that also produce situations that people will struggle, because if they are not flexible or something like this, they are out of something. And it's not really discussed why they are out of something, because they are out of something because they are wrong, but maybe the system could be also wrong. And maybe this is, I'm wondering, yeah.
When we mentioned the political theme yesterday, you said, well, my work is not as political as Alice is, because you see the Hambacher forest in her work, and that is very explicit. But your 4-channel video, let's call it, is that's only the last part of the 4 channels, because you have like a number. The first one is when you enter the console at the right, and the second one is on the back of that. The third one is if you turn to your right, and the fourth one is the one that you might also see coming in the Hambacher forest and the academy piece. Nevertheless, themes that have been touched by Catharina, like responsibility of the individual and the interdependence between society, privacy, intimacy, and the public are very much in the forefront of all your works, I think. Or am I wrong?
You're very right. Yes, I can relate to that a lot. Maybe 2 things. So the theme for the 4th episode for us was responsibilization, and it's a term. It's also sociological. No, you infected me. Sociological. It's a sociological term. Responsibilization, and it's in the 4th episode, and in short, it's a questioning of this redistribution of responsibility. So if a new idea, the new mainstream idea, let's say, is that everybody is responsible for climate change, everybody has to do their small bit, everybody has to recycle, everybody has to buy the right product because you can, because you're an informed individual. That means that at the same time, this redistribution of responsibility, the responsibility is taken away from places that it used to lie in, let's say institutions, the state, politics. So it gets like broken down to the, and what is then vernachlässigt is that, and what is neglected is that that individual actors have very different power. So you redistribute the responsibility, but you don't redistribute the power. So there's a logical contradiction in that, and this is something that I address. And the other thing is, which I think is more in the first 3 episodes, a theme that is running through is capitalist realism by Mark Fisher, which is the notion, like in short, that we are more easily able to imagine the end of the world than we are able to imagine the end of capitalism. And so also this yeah, so I think this might be like, just in short, 2 things that we draw upon or that we kind of like struggle with.
How do you turn that
How do we turn that into a film? One way would be that we have, so there's dialogue scenes and monologue scenes. What I often try to do with monologues, for example, when I'm performing or when I have other people performing for the camera, giving a monologue, moderating, I try to let them say contradictory things with a smile and with a strong suggestion of "Don't you agree with me?" And so in watching that, you might feel a certain kind of discomfort because the suggestion might be tempting, but you kind of feel like, no, you're scary. So that might be one way that I deal with this. And then in dialogues, it's also this either two people not saying the same thing but agreeing with each other at the same time, or saying in the helpline, thanking somebody for not being able to help me, and they say, "Oh, what, you're very welcome. I didn't help you. Bye." So, yeah, maybe this. Yeah.
I liked, as an illustration of what you said before, I liked very much the non-scripted part, like your interviews with people on the street, where all these expectations, you just quoted Mark Fisher about the expectation that, or rather the end words than capitalism. I actually started watching your work at that point where you were asking questions that at the first glance seemed quite banal, and they really draw from reality shows where you, like the morning the morning show, and you really ask yourself, who the hell is interested in that kind of question? But then it turns to be very interesting if you look at it with that kind of glasses, trying to find out what people think they are responsible for or not. And when you ask them what is luck, and the motorbiker says, if you got money, you're lucky. And then you start thinking, okay, is that a question of luck, or is it actually a social distribution justice question? And and that sort of plants the first doubt, I think. Well, you have talked about the placing, the locations of your work, which are important. There is not only the TV studio or the open street. There's as well the academy and the parliament. What kind of language is that opening for you? Why is that important?
So I think very similar to Ginta, when I got the chance to film at the Akademie der Wissenschaften und Künste in NRW, which is like an academic institution, and they support young academics and also artists. And I was able to film there, and they have this architecture, the discussion, the assembly hall, which to me looks a little bit like a small UN or parliament setting. Also a little bit futuristic, and it definitely has this idea of a little bit what we're doing here as well, of like a discussion on eye level. So we are all equals, and we will treat each other respectfully, and we will aim for the best in a rational discussion. And and so this idea of that this is how government works, or governing works, and questions of representation, of course. Then in the end, like who's on the podium, who will talk to whom, and what sort of status comes with that. And can a naked lady with an ape mask also claim the podium? Those things I think they're very performative, and I enjoyed playing with them a lot. That was very, very fruitful for me.
That brings me to the question back to Ginta. The power struggle. To present the power struggle, you are using certain location. I was surprised about the nature of the location that we've seen in your films. I wouldn't have guessed. Would you like to explain?
Yeah. As it is a visual work, you choose the locations which could complement the work, which would explain more what you are doing. Simply is that, in fact. Of course, I usually, I don't know, just choose also by color, but yeah, I would say simple as that.
But the architecture is also
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is actually, it's just a background which complements what you want to say. So, it's, if I would film here, it's as well like it's different material and it will bring a different story, right? So I was choosing more like kind of formal locations, like architectural. The one where I filmed? Well, I think it's in fact not necessary to know. But in sense that it doesn't say about work much more. Yeah, I would say. But if you're curious about location, that it's in Rotterdam and it was an auction house for selling fruits. But it doesn't say anything to the work, about work more.
Yeah. I was surprised. I just say I was surprised because to me it looked like the scene of a courtyard with the judge sitting high above everybody and then all these people trying to get their right, not knowing what kind of location it is. It opened for me like the whole horizon of claiming justice, getting to the high position, because all these people try to climb on that high table, but they don't get there. I find it even more intriguing that this is not a place of justice, but it's a marketplace, and people want to get on top of that. So it's a beautiful addition to what I thought this scene was about. So I like that information. I wanted to share it with you.
Okay.
Okay, we have been talking about politics, and when we talked before, some of you said, well, yes, politics is one part of it, but obviously there's also, what about fun? And I think, Catharina, you might say something about fun, won't you?
That's a good question. Fun. I just have to think. It's no fun. Yeah, it's no fun to speak about fun. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. I think in the art piece, there is. I think it looks funny, and I think it is also funny, but it's on such a way funny that you get also a little bit frightened or something like. It's really ambivalence of funny and also really sad, I think, because it's really sad to see how the objects are working there, or maybe they are not working, they are from a machine. The machine make the movement of the objects, and they are not really able to do something by themselves, and maybe this is maybe also the grotesque moment of the piece that it is funny, but it isn't funny. Yeah, and it's also maybe, of course, it's also designed or maybe made with this all colorful and waste material and something like this. And the first maybe opinion is it's not really serious or something like this. But I think it is serious if you just take your time and also maybe just follow the objects or maybe just go deeper into the movements of the objects. It can also be said if you just want to transform it into be a subject or something like this, or to be in something and where you cannot escape. And it's maybe a hard situation, funny. Yeah.
Okay, I agree. It's like a joke that sticks in your throat, as we say in German. When you read the text, I like to follow you, but you never turn around. And then actually it turns around, but it doesn't see you. Okay, that's true. Is there true fun in your work, Ginta?
No, it's a bit like irony. I use usually irony to. It's totally not fun, but you can use irony, I would say.
I have to say that I was laughing a lot at both of your pieces, or maybe not a lot, but also at the changing of feelings or getting attached to something, getting attached to the trolley, and like following it around a bit and feeling like, oh, you're not gonna make it for long, and also I mean, when you also in your piece, like your gaze is not guided, so you are deciding with whom you stick, with whom you stay for a little bit, like which screen to watch and which protagonist to follow for a little bit, and then sometimes when you lose them and you come back and then something happened to them or their podium was destroyed, then there's inevitably like some joke or slapstick situation, but it's not it doesn't. I feel that you don't get. It's not a humor that distances itself, distances me from the thing. It's not that I laugh and then I can write it off, but I laugh because I empathize, maybe, like Sorry, I'm talking about.
Maybe it looks funny, but there is a thought under, so it's some short sentences.
So you prefer to talk about the fun that you have looking at other people's work? No. No, I can tell you that I had a lot of fun watching you, and I was also watching your piece. It was a little bit similar to the experience with Catharina. It sticks in your throat once in a while, but then I thought it must have been so much fun producing it, trying out all those awkward movements, and I was, when you told me that for some of those kind of funny gymnastics that you do in the studio where you're all crawling on the ground and lift your ass to the camera, I thought, oh wow, you need to have a lot of self-irony. And I hope that this still continues when you watch it yourself.
Are you saying we don't look sexy when we're doing that? Because it's supposed to be very, it's supposed to look just amazing. No, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and I couldn't do. I don't think I could do an artwork that doesn't use humor, because often, to be honest, often that's like my guidance. to to go towards something. If I find it funny, if it attracts me, then I might like go towards it. So yeah, definitely humor is a lot of, when we're editing, if it's funny then we keep it, and if not then we throw it out.
I have the feeling that the humor that is created by your work has something to do with being very contemporary, because you're constantly quoting scenes that I've seen, but then there's the little variation. It reminds me of something very familiar, but then you turn it into something really absurd. And I wonder, how long will your work last? Will we understand it?
Yeah.
A few years?
Oh, good question. I don't know. I mean, a lot of people say it's outdated already. Like, maybe not a lot of people, but some people say it's that looks a bit like 90s or old-fashioned, or actually, yeah, I would say a criticism that I get is that it's not contemporary, that it's like a little bit behind sometimes. And I don't know, it's the best I can do. But in terms of contemporary, but and also maybe I guess it's true, because I like a lot of things that are not particularly contemporary. I like Alex Berg, who is from the 90s, and I like forced entertainment. I like all these things. So
Don't say that forced entertainment is only for the night.
no, they're still alive and kicking. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how long it lasts. Oh God, that's scary.
It's a hard question. I can totally agree.
This is the most important question. We are all wondering, will it last until the end of the show? It's consuming itself.
Yeah, I think it's now in progress, and it will work here. Maybe it's now when it becomes a worker, and I think he will. I think the object maybe will sweat in the end, and maybe if it would wear a shirt or something like this, it will be really dusty and ugly. I think I cannot really say how it looks in the end and maybe what will happen, but this is also the interesting part of the art piece, that it's in progress and then it's working by itself, and you cannot really calculate what will happen and what maybe if the material will all the time make what it has to or do what it has to do, and what object will end and what object will survive or something like this, which is what is the strongest object maybe, what is I cannot really say. It's we will see what how crowded it looks in the end, or maybe it's not crowded, or you mean that if they are broken, if it will recycle or will refresh it, or what? Okay. Maybe they get if they are hurt, I just I heal them. Yeah, of course. Maybe not on that way, but maybe they get damaged. But maybe it's like they are used objects, and maybe once they will maybe it have to be used so long if there's nothing more there on material or something like this. Yeah, it's maybe this idea of working. Yeah.
Anna Bittner, can we promise that we will document that on Facebook so that people who will travel home see in the next weeks the state of consumption? Yeah. We will try to do that, because you won't see it from tomorrow on, I guess. Yeah, I have to leave it to us. Ginta, the question that I wanted to ask you, you have already given it away, because we have those male fighters, and I hope one day that will be outdated and we will have ladies documented in your work. But you're going to do that with the Black Friday project, I guess. I wonder whether there are men fighting for their purchases on Black Fridays. Are there?
Yes, a lot. Really.
I'm happy to hear that.
Yes. Even man more, in fact. At least what I have seen in YouTube. But so you want female fighters?
No. I want to reflect on gender.
Yeah. I think it's. I don't know. I think it's nowadays so mixed. Like new generation relate to different genders. So time is changing.
Time is changing. I'm wondering whether any of you have questions to the artist here present, or whether you as artists want to ask somebody. I have to do that here.
Yeah, I would like to ask a little question to Ale, even if we already had our little Q&A privately after our dinner yesterday night. So what came up to me in this talk was this up-to-dateness of the TV content, or the post-documentary TV content you're streaming in your project. And I was asking myself if you would say, if it's a real importance to have an up-to-dateness in your content, or if it's more about the structure, because I think you're more focusing on the structures itself, working in the TV formats, and that's what you're repeating in a way. But seeing your clips brought me to this point with the Hambacher Forst. And only in this little episode I was a little bit stumbling about this content chosen, and would love to know why it came up to this, because the other content to me appears even more like abstract in its form of pointing to a content, up to a certain context.
Haben wir eigentlich noch ein zweites Mikro?
The fourth episode is the one that I don't think in the for the rest of the episodes I couldn't pinpoint a theme. I couldn't tell you this episode is about this. We have themes, the weather and contagion and social inequality and those kind of like bigger themes that run through the episodes, but they don't have one. They are not directed towards exploring one theme. And the fourth one is a little bit, and it had to do also with that I got some extra funding to do it, and I had like a framework where I could then produce the fourth episode, and it was happening at that time that the Hambacher Forst, the blocking of the Hambacher Forst was happening at that time, and I was there, and I took the camera with me because, and that's the second part of the explanation, because what we always try to do is to have this Felix calls it like a sandwich of documentary and performance and staged parts, and then ideally you look at the stage parts through a documentary lens and at the documentary parts through the lens of staging. And I think in this if you look at it this way, also the moments in Hambacher Forst are not only the specific moment that is documented, but it's also a staging of protest, of police violence, and it's a little bit, and that's also why I like them a lot. It's a little bit displaced because this rioting is like rioting, but it's happening in the woods, and the police and all the for me it looks so displaced, because it's usually you would see that in some sort of urban context, but that's like the bunny rabbit next to it. It's weird, and so I think that for me it has the abstract level as well, or the staging of it is as interesting to me as the concrete news event, let's say.
Yeah, but it is pretty well connected to this super specific topic which came up so big in the recent media part of our culture. So that's why I was wondering why this is so inbuilt in your other something.
I'm actually, it might be because I just come from a conference about climate change and artistic attitudes toward that, and I have seen so many protests in the woods beside Hambacher Forest, so I guess that in an international context it wouldn't be that bullet pointed as very up to date and yesterday. And actually I don't see that as displacement either. It might be your watching experience, and it might also be that it's not that much documented, but in artist context you see a lot of people fighting for the preservance of nature. Maybe because so it's not that I don't see that displacement. Sorry, but you wanted to say
I supposed a little bit that also had to do with Cologne maybe, and the nearness of it, and some of the ex-students died at the Hambacher Forst. I don't know if this also involved a little bit the kind of engagement. It's also it was next door, everything was happening, and so I think it's always important and more interesting to deal with what is next door, also in your artistic approach. Maybe I don't know if this influenced you. Maybe not, but it's just.
So Stefan, he was a former. He studied at KHM, and he died he was there as a documentary filmmaker, and he died. That happened after we were there, so I didn't go because of that. But a lot of people at KHM were involved, and but it's of course. I mean that's part of it, yes, and it's I think the mediated image of it is not, as I tried to say before, it doesn't make it any less real. So it doesn't, even though that's what I reflect on, it doesn't mean that I'm not affected by it. Yeah, that's what I would say.
More questions?
Maybe one more?
Yeah, also a question for Ale. Are you interested in making more TV programs? And in that way, it will be contemporary to go on with it. And yeah, I like the idea of camouflage with using mainstream language vocabulary. So I think when you go on with it, it will be contemporary.
Yes, there will not be any more episodes of Studio Hallo specifically, but I will definitely will do other projects like it. Yeah, I will keep doing it, hopefully.
We hope so too. And we hope that everybody present here who hasn't watched the pieces entirely, they take some time, come back and enjoy. And you still have the opportunity to talk to the artists today. So catch that opportunity, and thanks for your attention.
Thanks to Julia.